So Glass Animals is an aesthetic, not a band. We all know a guy who wants to be Dave Bailey, and if you don't, well, now you know me, so I guess I'm still right. And no, I don't want to dress up as Dave or act like Dave, but I want to think like Dave. So stick around to explore a brilliant creative mind. Hi, hello, my name's Milana. To be honest, my hair's still a mess. You know where you're at. And it's been 5 years since I last saw Glass Animals. I'm not okay. So you might be wondering, hey, who's Glass Animals? What is this band? If you saw the thumbnail and you clicked, you probably definitely know who they are, but I'm still gonna do this. Well, basically all you have to know is band, jungle, pineapple, pixels, and floating head supremacy. So basically it was like 5 years ago when I was going to this festival, and I usually do my homework when it goes to band. I would usually read up on whomever is singing at the venue, but this time I wasn't really keen on doing that, and to be perfectly honest, I wasn't really excited about who was singing that year. I was young, that's my only excuse, but that's 5 years ago. Yeah, I know, but I was young, okay? So basically this friend of mine drags me to the stage and she's like, there's this amazing band. And I'm like, sure, whatever. I just want to chill. And if the music's good, I might stick around. If God blesses you with the occasion of seeing Glass Animals live, do not be me. Do not skip venue and try to go home, because I would have missed the story of a lifetime. Because they literally influenced every step of my artistic academic life, and they still are. I should have went home, but I sat around to see them for some reason. But yeah, that's enough about me. We'll get to specifics as we go. I'm going to take every era or aesthetic and go step by step and talk about video directors, direction, and basically how it all ties into a marvelous masterpiece of a legacy. But first, quick facts. Youth doesn't sound like a word once you say it a few times, but youth sounds like you're boarding a plane, excited to travel the world, but you're lifting through the sky as the sun rises or sets. And only real rappers can sing Cane Sugar. And if you know who Sasha Fierce is, canonically, it's too late for you, I'm sorry. So let's talk first album. Scary. No, really. Maybe I was too young, but it scared me. That whole album feels like a trip that I did not pay to be taking. And yet I love it. If we talk about aesthetic, it's a dark, mesmerizing, kind of very self-contained environment that the band managed to create. The lyrics, as much as the overall tone of the track list, keeps you in a story, keeps you inside this jungle, and all these noises that you hear throughout the tracks, they deeply remind me of the way I felt about Pink Floyd's The Wall, because Pink Floyd was one of the first and few albums that keep me in a parallel universe, and I cannot listen to one song without going through the whole album, because I feel like once I go in that universe, I have to stay there and live through the story. It's like opening a podcast. You can't just go and cut a chunk at the middle. You have to go through the whole thing, and that's exactly how I feel about the first album. Also, kids, don't waste your money on candy. When you have these videos for free, use them as a free trial before you try anything. Trust me, you won't be sorry. And that segues me into videos, because videos are kind of an important thing to the aesthetic of the band. Yet to me personally, I don't think that's what actually influenced me as an artist, but I think that's a major plot line which we have to follow to see Dave's and the band's expansion into creating their own little signature look and feel. So let's start with the first one. Dave, what did you do with the Black Mambo? The first one. Go on, spit it out. No, for real. Does anyone know what happened to the first Black Mambo? Because I wasn't around to see it. So if anyone has a link to it, I would be curious to see it. I only found the teeniest, tiniest thumbnail I could manage to get my hands on. And it's 10 pixels by 10 pixels. And I cannot tell what it is about. It's maybe a river or a road or something into a forest or something. I have no idea. But next up, we have these little guys who who are like, just watch them. I'm gonna put little snippets so we can enjoy bits of it. I hope I don't get copyrighted for these two. I'm saving my copywriting for Dreamland. You cannot take it for these. I'm sorry. I would literally just post Dreamland. That's the video. That's the aesthetic. Goodnight. So if you'd ask me, the first album has a very heavy stoner vibe, but I guess I kind of enjoyed it without the stoner part. It goes just as well with a bit of a drink on a side, allegedly. So yeah, heavy referencing to stories and bedtime stories, but a very strong ambient vibe thingy. Like you would really feel like you're there. Again, a lot like Pink Floyd's The Wall. Kudos to Raphael, because although I'm joking a lot about the fact that they're very trippy and there's a lot to being able to digest them, they're very pleasing and very well made for a stop motion thing. I've seen a lot of stop motion, and this one is particularly amazing because my first ever feeling seeing one of the videos, and I think it was Exes, the first one I saw, was actually smelling the material of the thingies, and that's a very raw feeling, and you don't get that every day. But that doesn't necessarily tie into the aesthetic, so we're gonna move on. Basically, first album, pretty short. I know there's a lot of people who align with this jungle-ish stoner vibe, and I know this is like a thing that carries on a little bit in the future, but basically to me, I think like the first album was all about finding their way to Glass Animals. And I want to mention the fact that the first videos that were not stop motion or lyric videos were actually kind of weird. Ew. And a bit cookie cutter for that era and time, putting side by side with what other people were releasing around the same period of time. So I think this was a place where the band kind of just had a general visual idea, and then they were hit with actually getting into the scene, and it took them a while to get their bearings. But do not worry, because the second album totally smashed it. Now, by far, I am going to be subjective because this is the album that I saw them live with, and this is the first album that I was met with, and it literally influenced me for the rest of my life without me wanting to. Hear me out. So this album has this heavy arcade influence, which at the time did not really faze me, although I was very tempted to take colors from their palette of nuances of this era and kind of join them up, and I came up with this idea of doing a collection of paintings where I would combine jungly things with city things. And at the time I thought it was brilliant, so I made an exhibition about it at a tea shop, tea place, tea garden. It was something, and I was really proud of it and still am, because personally, although the execution is not outstanding, I'm very tempted to take some of these ideas and remake them with the skills I have now, because they're kind of sweet and they have a meaningful place in my heart. But that was before I actually looked deeper into the album, and this is where we're gonna talk about now. We're gonna talk about the album artwork. Now, the album artwork has always stood out to me. I don't know if it's the arcadey vibe or the colors or the fact that it looks vintage, shot on a camera with too much of something making it the color it is. I'm not that well versed into specifics of cameras and specifics of films, but that's the vibe it gave me. His name is Ashton Winger, also named Whoopi. I've had a really hard time finding him because wherever I found credit of him, he was only credited as Whoopi, and it took me quite some time to actually put one and one together and actually Google Glass Animals Whoopi. But I found it nonetheless. And he made one of my all-time favorite music videos, and at the time I thought it was outstanding how he made a video that looks good and then actually made it into something that looks video game-ish. When I grew up, I realized he actually did game dev, and we're gonna get to that in a second. But the thing is, and I'm not sure, and if you know this info, please let me know, because I've been trying so hard to find this. I don't know if he's the guy who actually did the artwork. Although, while trying to find that, I found this masterpiece. Kudos to you, my friend. This is by far one of my favorite renditions. I feel like in a parallel universe, this actually was a thing, and it was great. But also, let's not forget to mention the outstanding presence that made this album stand out as well. And that would be Neil Krug, which may our Lord Neil Krug hear us now. Seriously, he's done so much work, and that's gonna be a whole nother video about Neil Krug, because we cannot just talk about him in a small segment in a Glass Animals videos, because this is about the band, not about Neil. But I'm just gonna say that Neil did an outstanding job with the band, and I feel like I don't don't know if he was the one who pushed the boys to this point, but I'm sure that Dave coming up head to head with Neil had a lot to do with the coming of age of the band's aesthetic legacy. And I feel like this is the glass animals that has most influenced me and still influences me to this day aesthetic. I mean, why do you think I filmed at night? I wanted you to see my plants and my pink light because I really tried. Goddamn, you can't see this, but I'm going to film tomorrow. You're gonna see that behind you there is actually a poster of the floating heads from the Dreamland album. Why am I shouting? I don't know. But yeah, Neil Krug and Dave in the same room. Like, seriously, I would pay heavy money to be in a room with Dave and Neil Krug. I feel like Neil Krug to me is like what David Lynch has been to Dan Smith. I don't think anyone gets this reference, but it's fine. Also, in this era, we have to mention, and I'm so gonna butcher this, I'm so sorry. Ian Gleister? Is that the way you say it? I sure hope it is. I've been trying to say this one for such a long time, so I'm so glad you don't see all the takes. Ian Gleister? Where did that come from? With all due respect, believe me, this man in a parallel universe has created Gucci. Cause like, I don't know much about this person. I've just started reading about this person, but honestly, from Pork Soda and Agnes alone, I'm getting big Gucci vibes. Oh yeah, and you should know him from that Joji video. So if you know Joji Sanctuary, you can agree with me or not if this is big Gucci vibes or not. So back on what I was saying about the fact that it's heavily weird, but also vintage, but also arcade game-ish. I'm not saying that I've been heavily influenced by this, but I would sell my goat if I had one for this book. And I'm a fine arts graduate, and I'm getting my master's degree in fine arts, and I am teaching game development. How did we get here? It's your fault. And I'm not saying I have an 8-bit problem. You know why? Because I do. I do have an 8-bit problem. Does this? No, I did a thing on it. God damn. Oh, never mind. I have another one over here. Pretty. Yes, I have an 8-bit problem. Yes, I have a problem with 8-bit and art. Thanks, Dave. My project for my master's degree is gonna be an 8-bit thing, hopefully, if my coordinators agree with it. And also remember how I said that with this album, I made an exhibition? Well, with the next one, I actually curated an exhibition. As in, I made a whole thing from the ground up. Found the space, found the artists, curated the thing. I don't know what's happening, but I'm scared of when the next album's gonna drop. So using this great segue, I'm going to move into the third album, aka Vaporwave Galore. Galore. You pronounce this galore. Vaporwave Galore. It's not really. It is, but not really. I'm going to talk about it in a second. So the first single scared me big time, but now it's one of my faves. So what scares you makes you stronger, I guess. So because I've mentioned vaporwave and the floating head supremacy thing, I'm going to go straight into who might be to blame. This is Marco Mori, and I'm going to assume the Space Ghost Coast to Coast and Tangerine, the fan-made thing, were actually his work, and so was the rest of the 3D stuff. Although you cannot find info anywhere, so I'm just going to assume this. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. So I'm gonna be perfectly honest. I was a bit rude when I first come across Marco Mori because my first impression was, oh, he's another Beeple guy, which is rude. You shouldn't assume people are something just by the first look of their portfolio. You don't know what they did before or what they're gonna do in the future. And you can see he's very, very well versed in 3D stuff. And I say that because, funny thing, as Dreamland dropped, I was doing my summer practice, where you go into an internship when you're in art school and you do something to learn something. And I was in 3D school. And I don't know if this is coincidence, because if it's not, then my brain is doing some major stuff subconsciously. And I've already caught him red-handed a few times, so this wouldn't surprise me. And it's funny because I'm not even that caught up with the band. Like, I'm not the kind of fan who would be on Reddit, which I saw is very active, and I'm not in a lot of places. This is that one segment in every video where I try to excuse my absence in knowing stuff fans really close to the band usually know. So I'm sorry. Like, I just observed from a distance. It's like me watching Twin Peaks and that's it. I just watched the show and then being heavily influenced, because that's exactly what happened. I didn't dig into the band, at least not for a long while. But back on topic. Marco Mori is very well versed into the 3D world, I've already said that. But he has a very unique and absurd way of doing 3D, and I love this absurd art. I know this is a new thing because we have this uncanny valley thing and people use it. Some people exploit it to get some awesome things, and I actually dig it very much when people manage to do something that's very colorful and uncanny but also very happy, and it looks so good. And Space Ghost Coast to Coast is a good example of something that's uncanny but yet so beautiful to watch. And after I underestimated Marco Mori, I have later found out he actually worked with some household names, including a guy who was blocked on Instagram because he couldn't take a divorce right, and also Gorillaz, my loves. I just love Damon Albarn. I can't wait to do a video about Blur and Gorillaz. And to be perfectly honest though, the fan video they did for Tangerine was a bit weird. Just a little. I mean, it could also be the program we used to be blamed. And I say we because this was the first and last time I got involved with anything 3D related, at least for now. But moving on from something that was a bit discomforting, yeah, that's the word, we're gonna move on to Dreamland, the video. There's not enough words to describe how much I admire the work that was put into this. Because to me, the reason that I like doing art installation and going to Tate Modern and hopefully MoMA in the future or any other Guggenheim or any other place is because I love seeing stuff being made by people who aren't built to make those specific things. Art is about doing something as well as you can with a reason. Disclaimer, this is not what art is fully. This is just part of it, a segment that I enjoy. And to me, what Dave did with the whole setup and the plants and the hangy thingy, it's simply outstanding, and it's quirky and it looks good. And I know it was probably a lot of work, and I can always relate to the emotion of being in quarantine whenever I watch that, because I remember I was in quarantine and I was still doing my undergrad in fine arts, and I would wake up every morning and I would just work on this painting that was like a replica of another painting, but I did not have materials in house and no one would ship to my house, and I had to make do with what I have around the house, and it was a literal DIY challenge to me, and everyone had to do their own DIYs at home, be it with food and other things that I cannot think of right now. But like, to me, when I go into a studio and I'm told you have to do an installation, or the one time that I was supposed to do for the National Museum, I had to do this art project. When you tell me I can do an installation, my heart just fills with joy, because when you do installation, it's like this primal joy of putting things together, of building something. And no, I'm not big into Lego. That was just a one-time thing. I don't have any other Lego. I'm not into building stuff that way. But I love when you're told you can do whatever you want with the space. And the best part is, at least to me, when I was in quarantine, it was the first time in ages when I wasn't supposed to wake up and do my commute, do this, do that, do this. I would just wake up, and it was like when I was 6, and I would just wake up to get my cereal and go play some bootleg game that came with the cereal. And this is why the album as a whole hit hard to me, and I think to a lot of people, because what Dave did at this album was bringing back a nostalgia that was very well cultivated in a lot of us while we were in quarantine, because we were stuck at home and we had the privilege for once to feel like we were young again and we were on a summer vacation. I guess that's how I felt about it. But I'll get back into this idea. I just want to clear out the videos as well as we go, and then I'm gonna sum it all up even better, hopefully. So let's talk about a Heat Waves video while we're at it, because that was again a very heavy quarantine video that, again, I did not know the story of, not until recently. And that is the warmest thing I felt on the inside in a very long time. The fact that they managed to get a whole community to work together to do this video, that's simply, I have no words. In my community, if you just walk outside and ask for something, someone would yell at you from a window to shut the up. Maybe it's because I'm East European, but like around here, they throw boiling water from the 3rd floor. So this is very wholesome. And like, correct me if I'm wrong, heat waves is now like mainstream because I made like an incognito page a few weeks ago on YouTube. And when I entered and I wanted to see what comes up first when you have a blank account, one of the first and few things I got to see on the front page was heat waves. And I was like, okay, it's been 2 years. And then I read about it and found out it was like a super hit. And that's huge to be one of the few things YouTube shoves down someone's throat when you make a new YouTube channel. So that means they really made it big, like big. And the fact that I don't know whose idea it was for both of these, Dreamland and Heat Waves, either Dave or Colin, one of them or both of them knew what's up. I'm just gonna say that, knew what's up, because they hit very home with the whole thing. And aesthetically speaking, they managed to capture the exact childhood feeling I was talking about being able to wake up and feel like it's a summer vacation again and you were nostalgic about being a kid, and then boom, Colin and Dave and whoever was involved managed to get this out, who had the exact feeling, at least to me, of being a child again. And I know this is the theme of the album, hear me out, but we're gonna finish the videos first. Don't even get me started on Tangerine. Tangerine is one of the simplest, most iconic videos, and you cannot change my mind. I mean, the song is one of my favorites next to Waterfalls, but like on this channel we geek about cyclical videos, and if you like that, you might as well subscribe and join the group chat. I mean, jokes aside, seriously, having a cyclical video, it's something in my primal human need. I'm not sure what, but it's one of the most satisfying things and most, oh, I see what you did there thing I can think of. Because it's really simple. It's literally just Dave in a car with some props, and yet it's so strong. Of course, the narrative is strong, but visually, we're just talking visually here. This is a visual channel. Talking visually, the way he's portraying everything is like a parody of it, but not too funny because it's also a serious topic, and it goes around and you're like, this is so heavy, but so lightheartedly imagined, visualized, explained. Help. I don't even have words to explain this. It's just simple, effective, heavy, but lighthearted. And that's what makes it a masterpiece. And that's exactly how I feel about the whole of the album. Now, because we've talked through all the videos and I know I couldn't stop about childhood and everything, I did it because I had a thing to it. Now, to me, Glass Animals in a long time was all about visual. Again, I wasn't really involved, but now knowing more than I did before makes a lot more sense into understanding the way Dave thinks. But hear me out. This is a channel where I decided we will talk all about art direction and creative thinking. And if that has to do with the way a man decides to research his music and his influences, then so be it. We're not here talking about music, although I will put my input. Thank you very much. Space Coast, Coast to Coast is a bob. And now again, the album came at a time where we were stuck at home, most of us jobless, and we had the time and privilege, I guess, to wake up in the morning and not have a commute to do and not worry about stuff. And that to me and to a lot of people woke some nostalgia up, and some of that combined with the whole vaporwave but also new way of experiencing 3D was a visual and atmospheric masterpiece, because this album, just like How to Be a Human Being, had this thing about visual but also storyline. And now the first album did not really have the visual, but had the storyline and the ambience. The second album had the visual, had the storyline, not so much on the ambience, to be honest. But Dreamland, bing, 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 a masterpiece. At least for now, because things might change. I might look at things in hindsight. Maybe they're planning something new in the future, so I don't know what to say. And now the thing is, we can only look into the future and think, if this is where they've come now, I'm extremely curious to see where their direction visually and emotionally is going to go, because this has been a coming of age not only to the band and the visual legacy, but also to Dave as much as to everything else around it. Because I feel like Dave also had this evolution of getting in touch with a lot of feelings and searching inside of him and finding comfort into looking inside of him. And that's interesting because without me wanting to and without me knowing that this is the background of the album. I finished my undergrad a year after the album came out, and I literally did a piece on my mom's childhood home, and that came really out of left view for my style of art because I usually don't do that kind of thing, but all of a sudden I had the urge to document childhood things. Again, a lot of subconscious, I think, thinking got me into this because I'm really heavily influenced by what I listen and what I see. And I know the last song they released had a very great thematic of red and vintage. And I'm scared because the last time they released a video with a heavy color theme, 2 years later, that color was chosen the color of the year by Pantone. So I'm gonna go get all the red things I find in the mall the next time I go visiting. So coming back to the topic of is Glass Animals an aesthetic or not? Because this is why we're here after all, with a very long context-based story. Did Glass Animals really create an aesthetic or a genre or something else? Now, I'm not gonna make any theories here. This is not a music theory channel. MadPad, you're not gonna be able to get this one. What I can say is that Glass Animals is an aesthetic, yes and no. And again, the first two eras are very relatable to a lot of young people. I've seen a lot of young people being very engaged with that music, and I remember when I finished high school, a lot of kids were actually into the aesthetic, and to be perfectly honest, who isn't into plants? Which actually reminds me, Dave, if you're watching this, the palm tree that has like very yellowish edges or brown edges, it doesn't like wind, so don't keep it next to a window that might open, and try to move it somewhere where you can humidify it. I do not think humidifying in a studio is a good idea, so this is why I'm considering maybe moving it somewhere else where you can humidify it. Palm trees don't like wind and not being wet, I guess. And it would be a shame for it to die because I know London can be unforgiving, but give the plant a chance. Also, I don't know if you design your place, but if you did, that sucks because I was about to ask you for a good decorator. So yes, it is an aesthetic because a lot of people can align to one of these eras or maybe fall in between or just make a soup out of all of them like I did. But it also is an aesthetic because it can highlight a few steps of the way through which Dave has evolved along with the boys into the creative maturity that I'm sure they all have achieved at this point. And the story is very similar to Bastille's Dance Myth that I've mentioned earlier, and I'm gonna make a video on that, do not worry. And this is one of the reasons they both have heavily influenced my art style. Both Dave and Dan started as little caterpillars, then grew into humongous moths. I'm kidding. It was supposed to be butterflies. But like, I'm seriously amazed how some people go through this maturity and creativeness, both visually and emotionally, because a creative cannot be creative enough or mature creatively if they are not mature enough and in touch with their emotions and with what's going on in their head. And that is amazing to follow as a young creative. Learning from other people and watching other people evolve is the best way you can evolve yourself. And at the point of maturity, we can finally observe how this band's legacy, creative legacy, and I'm talking all of the art direction of this band, has come close to the level of Pink Floyd's artistic legacy, both lyrically and visually, with amazing deep themes in lyrics, but also amazingly well crisp art directions in very distinct eras. That is not a thing you come by every day, and this is why I wanted to talk about this band and clarify that they are an aesthetic in that sense, but they also are not an aesthetic because it's about maturity and not about being stuck in one of these aesthetics. But also, yes, if you want to take them as a muse in your creative process like I did. So I guess, yeah, that's it. If you watched this far, thank you so much for watching. Dave, if you're watching, the palm, take care of it, please. It's a precious plant. Also, if you want to check me out, these are my socials, and I have my Buy Me a Coffee, which is a Patreon-like site. Also, my shop, which is a mess, but you can check them out. See ya. Thanks. Next victim would be the 1975, and I'll see you there.